What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season premiere of The Studio. The first two episodes dropped this morning on Apple TV Plus, and the show was created by longtime partners Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen. They've been writing, directing, and producing movies and shows together for a very, very long time, but the premise of this show, ripped straight from IMDb, follows a legacy Hollywood movie studio striving to survive in a world where it is increasingly difficult for art and business to live together. And ahead of watching these first two episodes, I'd seen a lot of reviews out there with people saying things like, oh, the studio, it skewers Hollywood. I was like, all right, that's cool. I wouldn't mind seeing a show that skewers Hollywood. I feel like right now the time is ripe for a great show or a great movie that does skewer Hollywood, especially at a time where the movie business has basically contracted 40% from the high in 2019. But I would say this. I liked the first episode, but didn't love it. And I disliked the second episode, but didn't hate it. I don't think this show really skewers Hollywood at all, because unless it's a joke or a scene or a beat where somebody in Hollywood actually might get upset, well, then you're not skewering anything. It's more of like a love song to Hollywood with a few good-natured jabs at Hollywood's expense. But I don't think a single person that works in the movie business in Hollywood is going to get upset about anything that they might see in the studio. And the question is, like, what kind of audience is there for shows or movies about the movie biz when the movie business is in a state of decline? Because I'm a freak. I'm obsessed with film history. I love movies about the movie business. Going back to things like In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart, which is basically a film noir about a screenwriter. Or what's another good example? The Player by Robert Altman in the early 90s. Didn't do huge box office, but was critically acclaimed, beloved by people who love movies. The studio's almost on the level of The Player, but not quite. The Player was a little bit more vicious because Robert Altman had more of like an outsider status than Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. I mean, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are Hollywood insiders, let's be blunt. Or a movie like Mulholland Drive is a great depiction of Hollywood, like the real dark side of Hollywood. What happens to young women when they go to Hollywood with dreams of fame and stardom? So I'm a sucker for any and all shows or movies related to showbiz. The studio, I'll admit that the first episode made me laugh quite a few times. Bryan Cranston made me laugh. Kathryn Hahn made me laugh. Ike Barinholtz also made me laugh. The character of Sal is particularly funny in this. But as I was watching it, I kept thinking, there are a lot of YouTube channels right now that are always talking about Hollywood and making fun of Hollywood that are actually more funny than this show. Like a channel like Pitch Meeting, I feel like is a great example where it's good-natured and it's humorous, but it can be particularly vicious about some of the stupid creative decisions made by a lot of these movies. And Pitch Meeting comes out basically every week. Sometimes it's new releases, sometimes it's old classics. But oh my God, like on a weekly basis, that guy just absolutely skewers Hollywood in ways that the studio, at least so far, seems reluctant to do so. And I think that gets at the root of what I find missing from the studio so far. And don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying the show. I'll continue watching the show. If we get more episodes like episode 1, it'll be a satisfying show. If we get more episodes like episode 2, it'll be an unsatisfying show. But this is a show tailor-made for my specific interests. But what this show doesn't seem to be willing to acknowledge is how a lot of people have just drifted away from Hollywood, no longer care about Hollywood. I saw some sort of study or poll yesterday where they're talking about Gen Z. If given the choice between watching a show on a streamer like Netflix or a big budget movie in the theater or a YouTube channel by a creator that they trust, they would prefer to watch content by a creator that they trust, because I feel like as user-generated content gets better on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or wherever, and as Hollywood movies get worse, and no matter how much you love movies, and movies are in my blood, they're in my DNA, movies have gotten worse. Let's be honest. If you look at like the Best Picture winners from the last 15 years versus all the decades prior, like, ugh, this isn't necessarily the best crop of movies. But I love and adore movies. I go to the movies a couple times a week, and I will always go to the movies a couple times a week as long as they keep making them. And who knows, maybe they'll get into this later in the season. But I feel like right now there's a reluctance on the part of the show, the studio, to confront any of the major problems confronting Hollywood, namely losing your audience to other forms of entertainment, which is an acute existential crisis for the movie business. The one big problem that they address, which is actually kind of hilarious, when Bryan Cranston comes in and tells the character played by Seth Rogen, who's just been promoted to run the studio, that the next big movie that they're going to make, that he's negotiating the rights to the next big legacy IP, Kool-Aid. And I about fell off my sofa, because that's so on the money. Like right now, after the success of Barbie, everybody's trying to turn like Monopoly into a movie or Jenga into a movie. Like everybody's trying to turn toys or games or well-known franchises into movies. Or look at the Electric State, turning like Mr. Peanut or Peanut Head or whatever the fuck that character's name was into one of the main characters, where they think because you recognize something, somehow that deserves to be made into a movie. I'm like, I'm sorry, as a movie lover, I don't need to see a movie made about Tang or Cool Whip or any other recognizable brand. But the way Bryan Cranston's character Griffin Mill describes to Matt Remick the way the studio is going to be kind of directed moving forward, I was absolutely howling, because I'm sure there are a lot of conversations going on like that right now. Like, how do we make a movie about Twister, or any other board game out there, as opposed to let's find a great novel, or let's find a great play, or a great story of some kind, where we can put our best foot forward with a great filmmaker. And, bless his heart, the character played by Seth Rogen, Matt Remick, is a movie lover. He dreams of making auteur-driven films directed by somebody like Martin Scorsese. And I thought the show is at its most interesting when we see Matt Remick trying to find a way to combine Martin Scorsese's pitch for a movie about the Jonestown Massacre, and then working it in with the Kool-Aid concept, because for people who don't know, the Jonestown Massacre ended with a lot of people committing suicide, drinking Kool-Aid with poison. I was like, all right, you're onto something here. Like, this show seems to be really getting at the root of the creative process in Hollywood as we know it. But there are a lot of other scenes where I felt like the subject matter and the comedy was so niche and so inside that I worry that the appeal of the show might be pretty limited. Like, there's a conversation where a couple of different execs are discussing the pronunciation of Steve Buscemi's name. I've been calling him Steve Buscemi my whole life. Some people have been calling him Steve Buscemi. But if you hear it from himself in the show, his name is Steve Buscemi. But like back in the 1990s, when Steve Buscemi was in everything from friggin' Reservoir Dogs to you name it, he was all over the place. Independent films, big budget movies like Armageddon. Like, Steve Buscemi was having his moment. People would have these debates, but it's like, are you really turning like a 25-year-old debate into a gag and a comedy made for audiences in 2025? Like, maybe there are 1,000 people out there that are actually going to enjoy that joke. And perhaps my favorite scene from the first episode is when the characters of Matt and Ike go to a party at Charlize Theron's place. And they're trying to avoid bumping into Martin Scorsese because they know they've bought the script to his idea, which they initially thought they could turn into the Kool-Aid movie. But now they realize they're going to have to go in a very different direction. But they're basically going to have to keep his script, which they've bought, and kill the project, because making a movie that might negatively impact the brand of Kool-Aid would obviously hurt their big Kool-Aid franchise. But of course, they immediately bump into Scorsese, and he's all excited, and Steve Buscemi's all excited. But when Ike is appointed to break the news that not only have they bought the script, but they're going to hang on to it so that he can never make the movie, the way actor Ike Barinholtz kind of gasps and inhales all at the same time after sharing the bad news, because their heroes, Martin Scorsese, they love Goodfellas. The episode ends with them rewatching Goodfellas. But it just had me fucking screaming with laughter, because I'm sure that kind of Machiavellian backstabbing goes on more often than anybody would like to admit. But as I was watching that first episode, I kept having this nagging feeling that perhaps this show is just going to be a little bit too inside, unless you're somebody who really enjoys following the entertainment industry. Like, a perfect example, Matt's driving along the road at one point in his convertible, and he's listening to a podcast in the car, and he's listening to Matthew Bellamy's podcast, The Town. And I love The Town. Like, if you want to hear a podcast devoted to trends in the industry and inside information without really having a discussion about which movies are good or bad, once again, he's only concerned with awards and box office and success and that sort of thing, Matthew Bellamy's podcast is absolutely fantastic. But I don't know what the total audience is for Matthew Bellamy, but there's a small percentage of people watching shows on Apple TV Plus that are probably going to recognize, oh, that's Matthew Bellamy. Like, he's a total badass. Like, what a great little detail to include in the show. Once again, it's a little detail for insiders or for people who are just obsessed with the movie biz. But I think what the show really needs is some viciousness. Perhaps the best satire about media and entertainment ever made. Actually, no perhaps about it. Hands down, the best satire ever made about showbiz is Network by Sidney Lumet, written by Patty Chayefsky. And admittedly, that's about TV and the news industry and or the news biz back in the 1970s.
When he gets back, he'll have your ass.
I got a hit, Schumacher, and Ruddy doesn't count anymore. He was hoping I'd fall on my face with his Beale show, but I didn't. It's a big, fat, big-titted hit, and I don't have to waffle around with Ruddy anymore. If he wants to take me up before the CCA board, let him.
But it is more apt and more on the nose and more eerily prescient than ever before. That movie is an absolute masterpiece, but it is savage. It is fucking ruthless, both on the page as well as with the performances by all those incredible actors. And if you've never seen Network, you're in for a treat. It's going to blow your goddamn mind. Like, wait a second, this was made 50 years ago? It could have been made yesterday. the studio, it isn't vicious at all. It's kind of sweet and kind of cuddly. Like there's a scene between Catherine O'Hara and Seth Rogen where he's talking about how he's always loved movies. He's always wanted to make great movies, and now he's in a position where he feels like his job is just putting him in a position where he has to ruin them. And then she says, well, the industry's all fucked up, yada, yada, yada. But every once in a while, the stars will be aligned, and you'll make a good movie, and a good movie lasts forever. But this is very hopeful, optimistic, kind of, what drives certain filmmakers, like making the great American movie. I think the studio, once again, if it had sharpened its claws a little bit, there's so much about Hollywood that is open to be ridiculed right now. And the show just seems to take zero shots at it. Like at one point, they're talking about from the point of view of Bryan Cranston's character, the obsession with diversity in the workplace, and when it comes to gender, race, et cetera, and so forth. But they barely scratch the surface, and I feel like there's just so much material there that is ripe to be exploited. But who knows? Perhaps they will exploit that material to greater effect later in the season. And there's another angle which I got very excited about that the show kind of scratches, but then left alone. But Seth Rogen's character has an assistant who's about to be promoted to a creative executive, and she says, I feel like I came to this industry 30 years too late. And I was like, aha! You're getting at it. Like, you're on the right track here, because no matter how much you love the movie biz, no matter how much you love the movie biz right now, I think everybody can agree Hollywood used to be cooler. In the 21st century, because of the emphasis on IP and brands, movie stars are less important than ever before, and due to social media, movie stars are less mysterious than ever before. But like in the 1920s up through basically the 1990s, movie stars were like gods. Like wherever they went, it was like a mix of like, it's just like a god from Mount Olympus and a rock star all rolled into one. Whether you're talking about people like Charlie Chaplin in the 1920s, or friggin' Jack Nicholson in the 1970s, like, pick your favorite era of filmmaking, pick your favorite movie star, but movie stars used to have an air of mystery and a mystique and a cool factor. Like, oh my God, I love reading books about film history and watching documentaries about film history, and I could hear stories about, Robert Towne and Bob Evans and Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty and all those guys in the 70s until the end of time and remain just riveted every step of the way. The studio needs to acknowledge that modern day movie stars just aren't as cool and just aren't as mysterious. But once again, I feel like the show is kind of hinting at these things, but it's kind of afraid to go there. And I think as a creative team, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are capable of being funny. Like they've worked together as writers, directors, and producers for a very long time. But a movie like This Is the End is considerably more funny and a considerably more mean-spirited than the studio. I feel like maybe Seth Rogen has kind of softened with his old age a bit, or even The Interview, which for me was kind of hit or miss, did have its really, really funny moments. And as I was watching the show last night, I kept thinking, what would the show be like if instead of Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, what if they had Trey Parker and Matt Stone writing and directing and producing and perhaps even starring in it? It would be quite a different show, and I imagine in every area where this show seems to be cautious or pulling its punches, Trey Parker, Matt Stone would just be like, no, we're going all in. And that is the show that I would rather see. If you want to make a really honest, hysterical satire about Hollywood right now.
Is there a problem, people?
We were just discussing ideas of what to do with the new Prince Eric movie.
Put a chick in it, make her gay!
Maybe we should go a different route than we did with Indiana Jones.
Fuck Indiana Jones, put a chick in it and make her name it gay!
Sure, yeah. Well, let's try that. Again.
When they did that incredible episode about Kathleen Kennedy, and she kept using that catchphrase, put a chick in it and make her gay and lame. I mean, everybody who has got some frustrations about the direction of some of their favorite franchises could relate to that line. Yeah, put a chick in it, make her gay or lame, because it applies to many, many franchises. Like throw a rock, you'll find a franchise where they probably have put a chick in it and made her gay and lame. And that's what made that episode so goddamn funny. Like that one episode of South Park is 1,000 times more funny than the studio has been so far. Which leads me to the second episode, which I thought was a major step down from the first episode. And every single episode of the show all season long is going to be directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. But the first episode was written by Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, Peter Hoyk, if I'm saying his name correctly, Alex Gregory, and Frida Perez. And you can definitely feel like they were trying to put their best foot forward. Like, first episode, we're going to make a massive impression. But like a lot of shows, you get the sophomore slump in the second episode. And the second episode was written exclusively by Peter Hoyk. Once again, I have no idea how he pronounces his last name. Which makes me think that episode 4 and episode 8 aren't going to be as good because, once again, he's the guy writing them. But the same writing team that wrote the first episode also wrote the very last episode, episode 10, which will air on May 21st, which makes me think the very last episode will probably be pretty good. But this is a show that lives, breathes, or dies on its writing. Like, as great as it is to see cameos by Paul Dano and cameos by any of the superstars that I'm sure will be sprinkled throughout the entire season, if you don't have great writing, like, you know, as the old expression goes, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And at a certain point, seeing superstars, the appeal will wear thin if you don't have the writing to support your interest in the overall show. But the main hook of the second episode is that they're visiting the set of Sarah Polley's latest movie, and they've been waiting for magic hour right as the sun is setting, where they're going to do a big, long shot, and it's going to be just pure movie magic. And this is a show that relies heavily on very long takes, which is kind of cool, just seeing like how do you orchestrate and choreograph and kind of do the blocking for a long scene and kind of maintain that propulsive energy and that sort of thing. And so they're trying to create one of those shots, but of course the character played by Seth Rogen, he's a big giant movie nerd and he has all these ideas and suggestions, and everything he says or does seems to be interfering with their ability to get this shot where they've got a very, very narrow window before they will completely lose the light, and then the day is ruined. But throughout the episode, Seth Rogen's character keeps talking about how he got to start as a PA, and he knows his way around a movie set. He's not going to interfere. He's not going to cause any problems. And I've worked on some movie sets as well as some sets for some commercials. And to be fair, every single PA working on every single movie or commercial I've ever worked on, they know their shit when it comes to set etiquette, like not making noise. When someone says like rolling, quiet, please, people, because you know you're going to get fucking fired if you even drop like a feather to the floor. I found that the professionalism on the set, even the biggest dumbass who is brand new to the business, within 5 minutes learns the etiquette or they're gone. But the main hook of this first episode is that Seth Rogen keeps making mistakes, whether it's whispering or causing problems or walking into the middle of the shot or leaving his car where he shouldn't. And I just called bullshit every step of the way, because his character started as a PA and he worked his way up through the studio. Now he's running the studio. Anybody who's ever been on a set for even half a day wouldn't make any of the mistakes that he makes over the course of this episode. So for me, it just stopped being funny. Like, if you want to make fun of a studio head being a huge pain in the ass, there's so much ammunition and there's so much stuff out there that you could make fun of them about. It just made me feel like the episode was being a little bit chicken shit, because making fun of studio heads and making fun of executives and making fun of producers, there's so much potential there, but this show just seems to be leaning into kind of dumb, obvious, cheap physical comedy as opposed to going for the fucking jugular like a proper satire should. And while the first episode did make me laugh out loud several times, second episode, I was mute. I didn't laugh out loud once. I would even go so far as to say that the second episode isn't even a comedy. It's just kind of awkward, cringe stress where you're constantly kind of recoiling like, oh God, like why is everybody being so annoying? Or why is Seth Rogen's character being so annoying? But it wasn't enjoyable or entertaining, or like, either be vicious and savage and let us have a laugh at Hollywood's expense, or give us some divine physical comedy where we'll just laugh with joy and euphoria. The second episode just, I think once again, this is a little bit of a Hollywood navel gazing where they think the show is more, observant and more edgy and more hardcore than it actually is. And when you think you're being hardcore and you're not, it just makes you come across a little bit like a dork. And I worry that this show's going to go the dorky route as opposed to the satirical route. But if it goes If it goes the satirical route, I will be banging the drum on this show's behalf every step of the way. But once again, if Trey Parker and Matt Stone had made this show, it would have been a very different show, and it would have been considerably more funny. What it needs a lot more of are lines like we heard in the first episode, where somebody's talking about the success of Barbie over at Warner Brothers, and they said something along the lines of, if Warner Brothers can make $1 billion off the plastic tits of a pussyless doll, then we can make $2 billion off the legacy brand of Kool-Aid. I believe it was Bryan Cranston's character who said that, and we're going to need to see a lot more of him over the course of the season. I hope he wasn't just in the first episode. Lines like that will keep everybody entertained, because it's something everybody can relate to. Everybody knows about the movie Barbie and what it was based on, and everybody knows what Kool-Aid is. And so you need that kind of humor that can appeal to everybody, but also appeal in a really intense way to people who are frustrated with the movie biz, focusing so heavily on recognizable brands over really engaging, compelling stories. So it remains to be seen what kind of audience there is for the studio. Can it replicate the success of Entourage, 20 years ago on HBO? Because Entourage was a very different kind of show. It was about drinking and screwing and hell raising. It was about the movie biz, but it was more about guys in their 20s raising hell, enjoying all the trappings of stardom and whatnot, as opposed to trying to really do like a deep dive into the dysfunctionality of the movie biz. And the movie biz is incredibly dysfunctional, especially right now. Like, once upon a time, admittedly, I have rose-colored glasses about the past, but Hollywood used to be cool. Now it's just kind of this like this dysfunctional land of crazy people where we still enjoyed talking about it, but we talk about it in a very different light. But Apple would obviously love this to be a proper success to follow up Severance. Severance is one of the most popular shows in the world right now. But even so, Apple TV Plus, they admitted last week they lose about $1 billion a year, which is incredible. Like, with all the brain power and all the talent and all the resources at Apple, even they can't figure out the world of film and television. It just shows how challenging it is to make good movies and to make good shows that actually will appeal to people and put butts in seats at the theater or generate traffic on these streaming platforms. That's what makes the industry so much fun to discuss. But will this show be another failure like Babylon? Babylon has its defenders, but it was a big, giant, expensive $100 million movie made by Damien Chazelle about the transition from the silent era into the talkie era. Perfectly teed up for my interest. I ended up turning it off early on. I know I need to give it another try, but it all felt kind of inauthentic and insincere in ways because I'm obsessed with that period. Maybe I'm too obsessed with that period, but Babylon wasn't doing it for me. I don't know if the studio's going to do it for people or not, unless it's willing to go to the dark side and really just lean into all the crazy hysteria that seems to dominate Hollywood these days. It's much more fun to discuss the high-profile failures than it is to discuss when everything goes right and a movie really delivers incredible style and emotion, a movie that will withstand the test of time. People much prefer to discuss kind of the melodrama and the gossip and all the backstabbing and that sort of thing. So the time could not be more ripe for a show like this if it has the courage of its convictions and it's willing to go there. I'll be rooting for it to deliver, and we shall see what we shall see. But if we get to the end of the season and we get more episodes like the first, then I'll be the first to sing this show's praises. In any case, I think that's all I've got to say for now about the studio. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Am I being too harsh? Am I being too nice? I'm off to see another comedy this evening, Death of a Unicorn. I hope that'll deliver. It's funny how, right now, while Hollywood seems to be facing so many uphill battles when it comes to all their aging franchises, I remain very optimistic about the New York film scene, which is dominated by Neon and A24. Admittedly, the appeal of their movies is much smaller. But A24 seems to be trying to go a little bigger and a little more broad with their approach. Movies like Warfare, which are coming up, and obviously Death of a Unicorn, which is a big comedy with recognizable stars like Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega and that sort of thing. Who knows? Maybe we're just seeing the main thrust of entertainment is just going to come from other sources apart from Hollywood. But Hollywood, they've had a great 120-year run. Nothing lasts forever. But as somebody who loves the history of Hollywood and loves Hollywood movies, I hope Hollywood will make a comeback. But there's no guarantee that Hollywood will figure out all the problems unless they're willing to be honest about which problems are plaguing them the most. I imagine that there are a lot of people out there who are well aware of the largest problems plaguing their industry. The question is whether or not they're even in a corporate environment where they can air those views without being shunned or shamed or fired outright. We shall see. That's what makes it so much fun to discuss. But remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all the good stuff if you want to hear more reviews on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.